Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Coming in the Nile, AITA for exposing my aunt's secret Facebook account. My 32M family usually doesn't do much for Thanksgiving. Immediate family comes over for a late lunch at my grandparents' house. Immediate family that has moved away and extended family do their own thing, and we usually have a group call at some point. But this year, at the last-minute behest of my Aunt Karen, 59F, all my immediate family decided they were going to fly in, and we were going to have a grand old Thanksgiving for ages. Great, freaking great. See, for the most part, I like and get along with my family. I love when we all get together for non-somber occasions, because it's a rarity, even if it's exhausting hosting my off. But I cannot stand dealing with Karen. She's nosy, literally will sneak off to look through other people's rooms. Nothing is ever good enough for her, especially if I'm part of it. Self-centered, demands respect while giving almost none in return, etc. But hides it all behind being folksy. Somehow this works on most people, including my family, because they, for the most part, genuinely don't think she's a terrible person. My Uncle Mark, 63M, has also been madly in love with her for over a decade, so I have eaten from her with a smile for over 10 years. Thankfully, she does not come to many family events because she's busy traveling for her art career. Well, nothing I can do about it. Thus, the day of reckoning arrives. We all pile into my grandparents' house. I busy myself helping with cooking enough food to feed a small nation, while Karen arrives her standard 30 minutes late. Mark arrived on time, LOL, with some tale that starts with, OMG, you all won't believe what just happened to me, with her spawn Chase, 35M, and his wife Kelly, 27F, and kids, Keely 5M and Brittany 3F, no, those are not typos, in tow. While Karen regales most of my family with her fantastical tale, something to do with an unhoused person having an episode, my Aunt Ida, 56F, rolls over to the kitchen and tells me she has something to show me. Now, Ida isn't technically my aunt. She's my aunt's sister, who is very neurodivergent and mildly schizophrenic. In spite of her challenges in life, she's a sweetheart, but very blunt and to the point. I love this about her, which some people can find off-putting. She's whip-smart and very, very good at finding things, often things that people would rather keep hidden. So, if Ida says she has something she wants to show me, I'm more than a little curious as to what she's found. I pull off my apron and follow behind as she rolls down the hall into the guest room to show me her unholy knowledge. It's Karen's Facebook account, her secret one, with her name misspelled in a weird way, and her middle initial has like 25 followers, no security, with her reposting all sorts of vile, racist, bigoted, end-of-the-world stuff, and of course, her allegiance to Trump as the Christian Messiah, going back years. Holy heck, I have proof of how awful she is. Nuclear-grade proof. And Ida has screenshots. A literal archive of most of the horrible stuff she posted and reposted and commented. Before I could figure out what to do with said information, Mark yells down the hall that dinner's ready. We all get seated. My grandparents wait for the kids to start saying grace. They're religious, most of us aren't. But it makes them happy, so we let them do it. Grace is said. We then all go around stating what we're thankful for. Most people keep it short and sweet. I'm thankful for my family. I'm thankful we can all be here tonight. I'm thankful for my iPhone, etc. But Karen goes on a little speech about how it's time for families to come together and reconcile, in order for good to keep triumphing over evil, with the toothiest grin imaginable. Heck, not a good sign. Meanwhile, all I can think about is what she's saying now with what she's posting on her secret account and realizing the depths of her depravity. Thankfully, dinner starts not long afterwards, and her speech is forgotten as people silently devour the food before them. Once the plates are scraped clean, some go for seconds, while the under-18s ask to be excused so they don't have to listen boomers talking about boring They depart to the guest room to watch TV, as long as it's PG and not brain rot content, with at least a few eye rolls. The rest of us adults are all sitting at the dinner table, making small talk in small groups, getting caught up, while I'm handling cleanup duty and tea coffee distribution. Inevitably, Karen throws some barbs at me as I walk by. You put too much sugar in my coffee. It tastes nasty. I put exactly how much you asked for. Don't drop it. Really. This pie tastes a little funny. Are you sure you baked it right? Yep, it's the same damn pie I've made every year for the last 15 years. I love coming here. It's like being at a restaurant. Great food, great company, and a mediocre server. The audacity of this and more. Each time I swallow my venom knowing and smile, which gets harder each time because I now have a way to punch back. Of course, the more politely I respond to Karen's thinly veiled insults, the more she feels the need to throw at me. Since I'm not biting at her barbs, she, I guess, decided to change tactics and starts loudly talking about her son's accomplishments. Apparently, he's been promoted to assistant manager at his union job, and he and his wife are celebrating their anniversary soon. And apparently, every time she talks about this, she feels the need to stare into the depths of my soul while I'm chatting with my uncles. Once again, I ignore her, not going to bite. After a good 10-15 minutes of realizing her tactic isn't working, she decides to turn her attention to Ida, who's sitting in a corner doing a Sudoku puzzle with my grandparents' cats on her lap. If it wasn't obvious, Ida and Karen do not like each other, and Ida tends to avoid her like the plague as she's rather non-confrontational. And Karen, to her credit, usually leaves Ida alone. But not tonight. Now I don't know what was said in the beginning. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher, but when I re-entered the living room, I saw them having an animated conversation away from the rest of the family, and as I walked towards Karen and Ida to diffuse, I heard the end of Karen saying, "God, what is wrong with you?" as she leaned down and got into Ida's personal space. My grandfather loves Michelle Obamas. When they go low, we go high. That. When they go low, you hit back as hard as you can. I can handle shit being flung at me, been dealing with it my entire life, but I will not tolerate people going after those they perceive as weaker than themselves. Me. Shut the up. Karen, how dare you speak to me like that, young man? She being rude. I am trying to help your aunt socialize more with family on such a wonderful day. We're all here, and she's sitting the corner by herself. She can do that any other day. Me. Karen, where are your manners? If this is how you treat someone who's only trying to help others, you shouldn't be here. Me. Help others? You are one of the most entitled people I have ever met. The only person you help is yourself. At this point, I realized that the entire room has gone silent, and the rest of the family is staring at us. Karen, do you have any idea how much I help my community as a small business owner? How many jobs I create? How much I donate to charity? How much I volunteer to help those in need? If you can't see how much I've helped you and everyone else in this room, you are truly lost. I have and always will continue to do the Lord's work, but there's only so many false accusations a person can take. Me. Yeah. Karen, please do yourself a favor and apologize. It's clear that you have fallen down a dark path. Take your first steps back into the light. Me. Funny, because your Facebook account doesn't look like someone who's particularly charitable. Karen. See? More false accusations. It's a shame to see a young man with such potential continue to lie through his teeth. Me. Your secret one, not normal one. Karen. How ridiculous are your lies going to get? Ida decided to chime in here. It's Karen, Kaarind, entitled, on November 23rd, you posted, "I can't wait for all those dirty illegals to be deported back to their countries. Rip out the blood-sucking parasites." On November 21st, you reposted, "Grab her by the you wish." On November 14th, you posted, "No more male rapists in the women's bathrooms. The violent left's war on women will not be tolerated." On November 6th, your post, "Yes, good will always triumph over evil. Those who plow evil, and those who sow trouble reap it." Job 4:8. Like some sort of racists destroying supercomputer, Ida continued to, from memory, repeat back all sorts of bigoted posts Karen had made or reposted, as the rest of the family pulled out their phones to check if what Ida said was the truth. You could see on people's faces first confusion, then disgust, as they realized what kind of monster Karen had been hiding underneath. Karen stood there completely frozen. All the color had gone from her usually rosy face, and then she, lost it, started screaming at us about we were a bunch of heathen liberals who God, by his instrument Trump, would cleanse in the reckoning that would soon come. How she had been trying to help use see the light, and since Trump won it was time for us to abandon our sick, sinful ways and repent to the Lord. How she can't stand that my sister lets her daughter fornicate with women. How we are effectively a bunch of worthless peasants she has taken pity on, and how grateful we should be that she dares grace us with her presence. At this point, I pour more gasoline on the fire and said that Trump has more in common with the Antichrist than Christ, and Karen started screaming at me, calling me a direct agent of Satan. What a compliment! My grandfather, Bill, 88M, stepped in at this point and shouted, "Enough!" Told me to leave, now, before I did more damage to this family. So, I left with a room of stunned family members behind me. I made a quick goodbye to my nieces and nephews, who were extremely confused why I was leaving early and busy watching TV. Now I'm home and phone is blowing up from family members who attended, family who didn't and heard secondhand, and even friends who heard about it through the grapevine. And realizing that I may have completely destroyed my relationships with my family. AITA, OP is not an AH for exposing her toxic aunt Facebook account, where she's posting. OP did nothing wrong. Her aunt is an AH for scolding him when OP exposed her to the family. So I would rate OP's aunt 3.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Successful-Status 403, AITA for physically defending myself by steadying my weight. I, 26M, work as a homeroom teacher in China. It's a brand new kindergarten, and we don't have a lot of employees ATM. I am currently the only homeroom teacher. I'll start this story from the beginning, so please stay with me. Our kindergarten has a secretary or receptionist, let's call her Wendy, 37F, who honestly thinks a lit about herself. She thinks that she runs the school for the simple reason that she is the principal secretary. This means that the way she speaks to people is the way that you would expect a ringmaster to speak to one of their trained monkeys. She also spreads a lot of gossip around the school, which causes a lot of problems between the rest of the staff. I have 20 kids within my classroom, and usually I have 2 assistant teachers. One is my lead assistant teacher, who also teaches math and Chinese language to the kids, and the other is my second assistant teacher, who doesn't really teach, but helps to prepare the environment and who helps to take care of the kids throughout the day. This week, my second assistant teacher took leave because of personal family issues, which means that it was only me and my lead assistant teacher. Yesterday, after my Chinese teacher's lesson, the kids had snack time, and right after snack time, they would be having a phonics lesson with me. During snack time, I quickly ran out of the classroom to laminate the flashcards that I had prepared for the lesson, and asked the secretary if she would please mind helping my assistant teacher to watch the kids for a couple of minutes. This is normal because we don't have a lot of teachers yet. She replied with, "I'm getting ready to leave for a meeting." She continued to play on her phone, and I called the PE teacher and asked her if she could help. She was very happy to help. I went to laminate my flashcards, but noticed that the laminating sheets were finished. I went to our storeroom manager, and she informed me that she had given the laminating sheets to Wendy. I ran back to Wendy, feeling quite rushed, because I know that I don't have a lot of time left before the lesson, and asked her, "Do you know where the laminating sheets are?" Not losing eye contact with her phone. She replied with, "I don't have laminating sheets." I told her that our storeroom manager told me she had given everything to her this morning, and she just completely ignored me while staring at her phone. I went behind the reception and looked in the stationery drawer. Lo and behold, the laminating sheets were in there. I grabbed a couple of sheets and rushed to the printing room. While rushing, I heard her say, "I'm already off the clock. Don't ask me anything." I left it and laminated my flashcards, did my lesson, and luckily the lesson went smoothly. Fast forward to today, I finished my English lesson with the older kids, while my younger kids, we have mixed age groups, were taking their naps. I went downstairs with the older kids and had them relax in the reading area within my classroom. This is when I noticed that the principal had let Wendy watch over the kids because she needed my assistant teacher to help her prepare for an activity that we're throwing for the kids on Saturday. It's a charity market. I went over to inform my assistant teacher and the principal that I'm going to let the younger kids wake up 30 minutes later than usual because they went to sleep later than usual, and that I would have the older kids have a PE lesson first. While in the middle of this discussion, Wendy storms out of the classroom and demands that I go back to my classroom to watch the kids. I politely informed her about what I was doing and that I would return to class in a minute, to which she replied, "Well then, no one will watch your kids." She walked back to the classroom and sat down with her laptop. I walked over and, as politely as possible, asked her to please not use that tone when speaking to me. I treat her with respect, so I hope that she can do the same. This is when she exploded and started shouting at me inside of a classroom full of sleeping kids. I reminded her that the children were sleeping and asked her to please leave the classroom. She left, and I closed the door. Glass door. I turned around and planned on walking back to the nap area to make sure that the kids were safe, and in my peripherals saw her turn around and walk back towards me. I turned around, and as I did, she flung the door open and stormed straight at me. I have PTSD from something that happened to me a couple of years ago, and my first instinct was to tense up my body and steady myself. She walked straight into me, and as loud as she could, she shrieked that I shoved her, got into my face, and shouted the words, "You shoved me! Hit me! Come on, hit me!" I told her sternly to get out, and that we can discuss this outside of the classroom. She replied with, "Why should I go out of the classroom?" The principal called her out of my classroom and gave her a tongue lashing for behaving like that within a classroom full of kids. AITA? OP is not an AH, and his reaction is completely justified. OP's secretary, Wendy, is an AH for being unprofessional in her communication. OP remained calm in this situation. So, I would rate OP's secretary 2.5 and OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Anonymous 2836. AITA for ending a relationship because of seemingly obvious red flags? I'm 17M, and she's 18F. We were together for a little over 2 months. We met over the course of 1 week and got together the next week. I broke up with her for many reasons, all of which I think are completely valid. And yet a lot of people seem to be on her side. So here I am. Things were going really well in the first week. A little too well, I'd say. She made it clear with both her words and actions that she really liked physical touch. I didn't have a problem with that, of course, because I liked it too. This is important. The second week comes around and she tells me she really wants to have this with me. Like really. She assured me that she didn't get with me just for this, but after that would often admit how much she wanted to. I'll admit that I was willing to at first, until I came to my senses later on. A little while after that, she told me about her past. She said she'd slept with more than one person in the past, without protection. I think it's important to note I had no problem that she had before, and I let her know that as well. Either during that same conversation or during a different one, she asked me about my views on protection, to which I replied by saying I thought it was extremely important, and that I wouldn't want to risk having a without it. Something to note, I've never had this before. I asked what her view was, and she said she understood the importance of protection, but never bothered asking her previous partners to use it, because it would take the fun out of it. Okay, it put me off a bit, but I didn't say anything about it at that time. It was either that same week or the week after, she, out of nowhere, said there was something she needed to tell me. She said that earlier this year, she got pregnant, but had a miscarriage. Now I had no clue how to react to something like that, so I was kind of silent for a good while. Fast forward a week or two, and I finally smacked some sense into myself. Actually thought about all of the things I listed above, as well as the fact that if I did have with her and things went sideways, the potential consequences could affect both of our lives permanently. So I came to the conclusion that there was no way I was willing to have without protection. I also had never asked her if she got any STDs from any of her previous partners. So that night, I brought it up by first asking 2 questions. The first was, if you got pregnant, what would you do? I asked this one cause the night before, she asked me what I'd do if she got pregnant. And the second was if she knew if she got any STDs from previous partners. She answered the first question, telling me that when she got pregnant earlier this year, she initially really wanted to keep the baby, then the miscarriage happened, but she said if she got pregnant now, she wouldn't keep it. She answered the second question by saying she didn't think she got any STDs, and asked why I wanted to know. So I said I was just wondering, and then told her that I wasn't comfortable with having without protection because of the fear of what would happen if she got pregnant. That was the only reason, and she said she understood and that it was okay. After that night, her entire mood changed. She went from wanting to do a lot of very intimate things in very public places to not wanting to hold my hand under a table because there were too many people. I found it weird, so I brought it up one day, and she said she felt like I'd been asking for too much and wanted some space for herself more, that I wanted her to focus on me and me alone, and not conversation or interact with her friends. That last part had me confused as hell, but I respected her wish, although the sudden switch in her mood was still on my mind. At some point after that conversation, she admitted that she was put off by my decision about without protection and felt like she should distance herself from me, and that I wasn't actually asking for too much, nor was I pulling her away from her friends. and wanting attention all the time. Now there were a lot of other aspects that led to my decision to end things, like how controlling she seemed to be. She once told me she'd never allow me to go out with anyone of the opposite gender, but she also knew it was wrong to think that way. I took a pill from a mutual friend in school one day because I was feeling really sick, brought it up casually the next day because the conversation was about me still feeling sick, and she made a huge deal out of it, telling me that I always went to everyone else but her. Those were just two of the many instances that, in my opinion, showed she was pretty controlling. There was also communication. My God, she was terrible at communication. She told me in the beginning of the relationship, but she said she'd work on it. That attempt at improving literally never happened 2 months later. There's a lot of other instances I can talk about, but this is already kind of long, LOL. Fast forward to a few days ago. One night, we had an argument that started like this. I told her I had an exhausting day and likely wouldn't be texting as joyously as usual, and she said it was okay. After I tried keeping a conversation going for a good while, I was the only one asking questions like how her day was, how were her dogs, did she eat, etc. And her responses were good, 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 nothing more. I asked if she was perhaps busy, and she said she was just on TikTok. So I replied with, "Oh, all right. Well, I'm going to go to sleep," because I was already tired and was going to go to bed soon anyway. Basically, she saw that message as me being upset and got mad at me in response to her. At some point during the argument, she said that clearly I had a problem with the fact that she had before itself, that is, along with a bunch of other things that were not true, and that we literally had conversations about already. The next day, the day before yesterday, I broke up with her. She didn't seem to care much, but it was no longer my problem. Right after she went and told all her friends and some of my friends, presumably her side of the story. I stayed home yesterday because I was feeling sick, but I heard from a friend that she was going around saying I was jealous, clingy, and it was inappropriate of me to ask about STDs. I'm just struggling to understand why so many people are siding with her. What do you think? AITA? Any advice would also be appreciated. OP is not an AH for ending his relationship and prioritizing his well-being. His concerns are valid. His girlfriend is an AH for blaming OP and defaming him in his circle. So I would rate OP's girlfriend 2 out of 5, and OP gets a 0. Let's now move on to the next story from Tenor Sounds. AITA for telling my father he has to accept if he wants to have a relationship with me? My father, 58M, and I, 32M, have been trying to reconnect and build a relationship over the last several years. He wasn't a good dad when I was younger. He went through some tough times, self-inflicted in case you're wondering, that separated him from the rest of us and his family. But now he's back on his feet. An important part of this situation is that in pulling himself out of the hole he was in, he went from a Jesus-loving Christian to a self-described biblical scholar that has completely given his life over to the Lord. Another important aspect to this is that he's a charmer, big personality that can verge on manic at certain points. He likes to poke and prod people to make a point, and he's pretty good at manipulating a conversation if you let him. So, we are in contact and having phone conversations. My husband and I met up and had lunch with him and his girlfriend, now wife, etc. He's happy to be back in contact. Big hugs, big smiles, nice and polite. But now he's really into his religion, talks about how it saved him constantly. And he isn't as subtle as he thinks in trying to convert or convince me that I should be a Christian. First major red flag to me, but I ignore it because I don't mind discussing spirituality in general. And I wanted to finally have a good relationship with my dad after all of these years. It seems like he's genuinely changed for the better in a lot of ways. Fast forward to a phone conversation we had earlier this November. We're discussing religion, and I told an anecdote about how just recently some church members came to our door and I had a chat with them. I asked them some questions about their denomination, mostly just being nice. And after a while it was clear my husband and I would not be welcome at this particular church because of our relationship. My dad's response was, "Well, let me ask you this, son. Have you ever considered being a is wrong?" Nice and polite as you please. I don't even know what I thought at the time. I think my brain just short-circuited, and I said, "What? Now, of course not." And he dropped it immediately. But that stuck with me. Before that, he was saying, "I tell everyone about my gay son," as if it was a point of pride, but after that question that just comes across as him telling me what I want to hear, I waved it off, not really sure why other than me wanting to keep the peace and not look into the implications of what he said. Plus, he wasn't being openly bigoted, right? He says he's a Christian libertarian, so whatever his personal beliefs, he wouldn't want gay marriage outlawed, stuff like that. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. I realized, after a while of running away from the conclusion, he had just openly disrespected me, my husband, and my marriage basically to my face. I confronted him on this in a later call, said that was not okay, that something was wrong if he thought he could just ask that, and I wouldn't be offended or hurt. What I got back was basically, I accept you, but not your lifestyle. And then it got heated. I'll spare you the full details, but we went through the whole gamut. Biblical scripture, societal consequences, health, and I basically shot them all down in various ways. The whole time, his refrain was, "It's just a difference of opinion. We disagree on." What's the problem? Why are you so worked up? This is America. We can have different opinions. Why are the gays always so upset, along with equivocation with people rejecting him and putting on a pity party or guilt trip, including me distancing myself from him as a kid when he was at his worst? Eventually, I was able to pull the following out of him after burrowing through his BS. It's sad and painful that my son is gay and my lineage ends with me. I took my husband's last name too, which I'm sure is another sore point. Every gay person I knew back in the day said they were. After I said he wanted me to get divorced and become a Christian, you have it backwards. I was thinking that if you became a Christian, you'd reconsider being a. Paraphrased, forget scripture, forget societal consequences. This is just something I am against at a spiritual level. God's truth as I understand it, and informed by my own bad feelings during my own consensual home experiences. There it is. So, I told him, this isn't some intellectual exercise. This isn't debate club. This is our relationship as father and son. I told him he is clinging to his trauma and biases instead of trying to understand why this hurt me so much to hear from my father. I told him that he didn't just have to apologize. If he wanted a relationship with me, then he'd have to look inside and grow as a person. Actually reflect and change his opinion on this, because it's causing me pain to know that he's harboring all of this toxicity about something so important to me. The genie can't be put back in the bottle, and he's the one that opened it. I cut off his last random attempt at a guilt trip with, "How is this relevant to what I just said?" And he said, "Well, I have to throw out something. You're asking me to change my opinion, and that's not going to happen." So I said, if that's the truth, then there's nothing else to say. I restated my ultimatum, and he just said, "Okay, bye." And that's where it ended. I can tell I shook him up by putting my foot down. He's used to getting people to back down in this kind of situation. I'm a bit of a pushover with social anxiety, but I am realizing I also hate being in a relationship limbo, where I just feel like crap, while ignoring obvious signs that something is up. Him being polite about this doesn't make me feel better. It makes me feel worse. My husband and mom support my decision, but my own brain is constantly insecure about it. His voice saying, "It's just a disagreement. I still love you." My own saying, "You're the one that got worked up. You could have just let it go." But every fiber of my being is also saying that the situation wasn't healthy or sustainable for me. So, AITA for telling my father he has to actually change his opinion on if he wants to hear from me again? OP is not an AH for setting boundaries with his father. OP's father is an AH for questioning his identity and refusing to accept it. OP's reaction is 100% justified. She did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP's father 2.5 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Candid_Ideal 2789. Family agreed to have Christmas dinner a month ago, without me. Now I've made other plans, and they are mad at me. AITA? I have one daughter, and I am currently pregnant with my second child. At the beginning of this instance, my husband and I decided that we would be buying a house and moving many miles north by January 1st. My family has not taken this lightly, and I can't recall a moment when any of the have paused and expressed their happiness for my own family. They've expressed how they are affected by my decision to move, and I've had to convince them to be rational, or console them. At the end of October, my two siblings, mother and I were all together for an event. I left before anyone else, and I had spoken to them each many times since last being together. Fast forward to the week of 17 to 23. My mom suggested in a vague way that I host Christmas dinner at my house. I confirmed with her if she meant I host dinner, and she said yes. I was so excited. My mom does dinner every year in her small one-bedroom home and has to accommodate up to 7 people. It's like a 600 to 750 square feet home. So, I was eager to be able to help my mom finally. I have a much bigger home, and my mom works very long hours for her age, and I was gifted the responsibility of hosting dinner. Even with packing, moving over 870 miles in the winter, while pregnant, I wanted to have one really great, stress-free dinner for everyone before we moved. I spoke with my siblings about the suggestion and said I'd be happy to do so. I did not ask them for their input on having it at my place. In hindsight, I know that I did the same thing as them, but I was really excited for the opportunity. And at this point, I still had no idea about previous plans. I spoke about it in sibling group chat. No one objected. My youngest sibling said that they were unaware of the days their partner would have off for Christmas week, but really didn't give much to work with. I also suggested doing a non-traditional dinner like taken out at first, to alleviate work for me, but ultimately made a compromise for a more traditional dinner because my younger sibling spoke up. We would just need to agree that no leftovers would remain at my home. The last thing that was said was that my youngest sibling was not comfortable driving an hour to my house in the snow with their 3-month-old baby. I totally understood where they were coming from, so long story short, I just said, don't worry about making a decision. If you can come then, that's great, but I will figure out the rest with our family. I didn't want them to feel pressured to make a decision they weren't comfortable with. Then there was silence. 2 days after our group chat, I spoke with my mom and brought up a day that would work for dinner because my youngest sibling was unsure if they would be able to make it. That's when my mom told me that she received a call from them the same day of our group chat, complaining that they were all already in agreement to have dinner at their house, and that I wanted to do takeout. I was confused immediately, and it turned into frustration. Why didn't my siblings say anything about this previous arrangement to me? I feel like the opportunity was there to interject, but was not taken. So, my mom told me she would handle the dinner plans, but I was still upset, so I expressed myself to my youngest sibling. Long story short, I told them that it felt like I offended them and that I didn't want to hurt their feelings. It felt like I didn't include them or take into consideration what they wanted or needed, but that ultimately I was hurt and it felt like an attack on me because I had no idea about those previous plans, and that I was hurt that I wasn't given the opportunity to tell my side before they spoke to our mom. They called me back within an hour and were immediately defensive, accused me of being hostile, jumping to conclusions, barring them from talking to mom, for not approaching the situation right and making them look like the bad guy. I tried to clarify that this was all a misunderstanding and miscommunication, but we couldn't come to an agreement. And after they said that I made them look like the bad guy, they said they didn't tell me because they were waiting to see if I was moving January 1st or later. They were pissed that I hadn't told them yet and left them out. So, no one told me for 3 weeks. My mom suggested that I do dinner. I suggest to siblings to host dinner. No one communicates with me about it. Talks to mom instead, and she says she will handle talking to me. I was further not communicated with. I express how I feel to my sibling, and my siblings turns it around on me. Since then, I've asked my mom 3 times in 10 days, an update for dinner. Each time she has said she will have it figured out tomorrow. As of today, I've made plans elsewhere. My husband won't be here for Christmas. It's just me and my daughter. I couldn't wait anymore for them. My youngest said they didn't tell me for 3 weeks because they all have lives and can't drop everything for me, just for an invite. I told my mom today about my plans, and she is pissed and not talking to me. Maybe I'm leaving put relevant information like, each time something similar happens. Instead of talking to me and hashing it out, my siblings involve my mom. I do not tell my mom what goes on between us, I just tell her how I'm feeling, and how for years, I've been missing the relationship I had with my siblings. We had a falling out 4 years ago, and things have been slowly getting better. But there will always be setbacks when I am involved, or I will be intentionally left out of events and gatherings, find out about missing it later, and just have to put on a smile and be happy for them. I don't know. Maybe it is me and I just needed to get this out of my head. So, Reddit, what do you think? I have asking myself for years, AITA. And I just try to accommodate, talk, and forgive, and I just don't know. At this point, I feel like I want to be wrong so that things can make sense to me. OP is not an AH for her reaction to her sibling's decision to have the Christmas dinner at their youngest sibling without telling her. OP's siblings are AHs for deliberately excluding OP from their plans. OP's reaction is 100% justified. She did nothing wrong. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for OP's siblings, they get 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from glittering-list-465, AITA. Because I won't become a daycare provider for my grandkids, I love being a mom and grandmother, and I've worked with kids most of my adult life. However, in recent years, my health has been wonky, and I've taken a step back to reevaluate what I'm going to do, and focusing on getting my health back on track. It's working, and I feel better now than I have in over a year at least. Recently, one of my kids asked me to become a daycare provider for them, that the state would pay me and they could work. The thing is, I don't want to. We have very different parenting styles, and the jobs they are looking at getting would not have a set schedule, so I would be on the hook for whatever they end up with. They also only brought this up after my husband and I went on a trip, like a once-in-a-lifetime trip, that they were upset over. They even had the audacity to say the money we spent could have helped pay for stuff for our grandkids. That really ticked me off because when each time our kids have added to their families, we have helped by giving them a check to cover 1 month of expenses, rent or mortgage, groceries, gas, car payments, other bills. Not to mention all the times we have bought groceries, baby items, medicine, dropped everything to help when asked. We also try to respect their boundaries and don't drop by unasked, don't kiss on the kids, etc. We are not stingy by any means. My other reason for not wanting to be a daycare provider, my husband work from home. There is nowhere in our home that is soundproof, and that clients wouldn't hear kids being kids. It wouldn't be fair to expect the kids to not make noise all day long. And we cannot afford for my husband to switch jobs. We've researched other daycares, and even early education programs. We are willing to help cover the cost for such, because we do understand how it would benefit the kids. We were told that's not acceptable, and we are just being selfish for not wanting the grandkids with us. I think it's selfish to think we should be the only option, and given a guilt trip for saying no and offering up other solutions. Any advice? AITA? Update. I shared some of the comments with all of my kids in a group chat. I think they needed to see that my husband and I already do a lot, probably more than most are able to, and that our boundaries need to be respected. My oldest apologized and admitted they were jealous of the cousins who have more time with their own grandparents. I pointed out how it seems great in theory, but how many times have the cousins had their parents miss important events of the kids because of it? I asked, what's more important to them? My babysitting and most likely getting ill again or being around for another 40 years? All the kids agreed they want me to be sticking around and being the funky grandmother they think I'll be. I said that sounded a lot better to me too. My oldest also told me they have been in contact with different places and are researching their options. Time will tell how things go. Thank you for the support. I felt bad because I want to do it. I just know I'm not the right person for it. One last update, and I'm going to turn this off for comments tomorrow. My oldest almost died when she had her babies. She had twins, and her heart stopped working right along with needing multiple blood transfusions, and is still being impacted by its health-wise. She would have to ease back into working, doctor's orders. This was clarified after another convo today. She's a fairly private person. We had no idea she was still having issues. We haven't done anything for her that we have done for the other kid, or won't do for the rest of our kids if they become parents. So, we now know she understands how health impacts stuff, and should understand that it's also why we made the offer on paying for childcare to begin with. We've offered to pay for someone to come in a few times a week and just help her in general, and she felt it was too violating on her space. We respected that. After today though, she now understands that we want to help her how we can, but that is doing it physically ourselves is not feasible. Thank you everyone. I appreciate the feedback. It's helped calm of us to see things from different perspectives. OP is not an AH for prioritizing her own needs. OP's children are AH for blaming OP and her husband for being selfish. OP's reaction is completely reasonable. So, I would rate OP's children 2.5 out of 5 and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now move on to the next story from Sapphire Skies 32. AITA. For not taking care of my roommate's animals while she isn't home. I, 21F, have lived with my roommate for almost a year now, and we were friends before we moved in together. I had told her that I wanted a dog when we moved into our apartment and had been saving for one for a while. I had slowly started buying things for my future puppy, such as a crate and bowls and toys. Then my roommate, 21F at the time, decides all of a sudden that she too wanted a dog. I told her I didn't mind, but would like at least a year between getting both dogs at least, and that would give her time to look for a good breeder. However, I am a pushover, and she easily used me for my better nature and took advantage of my situation to get her way. I had recently gone through something traumatic and wanted to get my puppy sooner due to being and feeling so lonely and going into a major depression. I told her to look for breeders as those dogs tend to be healthier and are less likely to have problems that need to be accommodated. She, however, was no longer looking at breeds and possible fits for her lifestyle, but she was looking in shelters for a dog, and even when I reminded her not to look at shelters, she would blow me off and say I'm just looking, which turned to I'm just applying to see if they accept, which turned into they want me to go see her. She found a puppy about 3 months old that she absolutely fell in love with. Me being a people pleaser, had no idea how to say no to her, especially because I was and still am very disconnected from the world. She took advantage of my kindness and got the dog the day off, somehow also getting me to pay for the dog one that came almost a month before I got my own dog. And of course, she had nothing for this dog, not a single item in her name for this dog, but guess who did? Me, of course. I had been buying stuff for my dog for a while now, so I had plenty of things, and also was talked into buying more stuff for this dog, because my roommate was pretty much broke, and could not provide for this dog, effectively putting me into a good bit of debt that she would never pay back to me. So now she had gotten her dog almost a full month before I got mine, and she was using my supplies I had gotten for my dog. This sent me even deeper into my depression and was really affecting me and our relationship. And this dog has a serious case of separation anxiety, like you can't even leave this dog in a room alone, or she barks her head off, something my roommate has failed to train her out of. And got even worse when it came time for me to pick up my 8-week-old puppy. She would shift in her crate if the puppy was getting attention, and she wasn't. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect dog for myself when I finally got my puppy. Eventually, when leaving for work, we decided to try putting her in my room to see if company with my dog while we were gone would calm her down and keep her from in her crate every day, which definitely toned her down from doing it every day. Fast forward to now, and it had been months of my roommate leaving her dog in my room to take care of, so she can spend weekends with her new BF at his parents' house, because he still lives with his parents quite a bit away from our apartment. So I would take care of her dog and cat while she was gone, so that they wouldn't be neglected while she was gone. This, however, has put a lot of extra stress onto me, and also made me feel guilty, as I feel I haven't been able to give my own dog the life he deserves, because we are too busy dealing with someone else's problem child. But of course, I couldn't bring up the courage to say anything about it, so I just allowed myself to suffer through it for months. Up until the last few days, I have finally told her that I don't want to watch her dog anymore, and that she needs to step up and stop neglecting her animals, because I will no longer be caring for them. This was a very hard step to take, because I feel bad for the animals, and I made a point to call her out on the fact she was neglecting her animals, but it has become too much for me. However, even as I write this, she has been gone for over a day. After I made it clear I would not be taking care of her animals anymore. She did not come home until literally just now, at 6:15 a.m., and she had been gone since the night before, leaving her dog in her crate all day, which I haven't really bothered to check, because it felt so good to finally be rid of the responsibility of her animals, and it was very healing to finally take down the extra crate in my room and free up some space. There are a lot of things me and my roommate don't agree on, and it has definitely changed my view of her. And I personally no longer see her as a friend, but I continue to treat her with respect and keep things cordial. TLDR, my roommate got a dog she couldn't handle and leaves her in my room while she goes on weekend getaways to her boyfriend's place while I stay home, and finally called her out for neglecting her animals and stopped taking care of them due to my own stress. OP is not an AH for refusing to help her roommate with taking care of her dog. Simply, it is not OP's responsibility. If someone wants to have a pet, they must have a plan and resources for taking care of the animal. OP's roommate is an AH for blaming her for being selfish. As for scores, I would rate OP's roommate 2.5 out of 5, and OP 0 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from responsible_crow3502. AITA for yelling at a child? My sister, 30F, asked me, F, for a favor to take photos of food for the cafe that she is working in. In return, she told me that they would provide us food. The cafe is new and will have their soft opening for a couple of days, so they needed someone to take photos of their menu. I agreed because the cafe is just nearby, and it would be nice to help my sister from time to time. My assistant, 26M, and I got there on time, and we proceeded to set up our equipment on one of the tables. My sister was there and other employees. The boss, mid-30s, was not hard to talk with, and he has this relaxing vibe that made us at ease and not nervous about the shoot. During our photo shoot, another guy came in with his family, and apparently he is one of the bosses of the cafe, late 40s. He brought his wife and 2 children, an infant and a 6 years old. While we are taking photos of the food, my sister has his own food that she is munching on. She went to the counter for a minute, and this child stole food from her bag. And I just told my sister what the child did, cause I DK what to do. So, my sister scolded the child and said, "Princess, not her real name, why are you stealing food? Did your parents teach you that?" In an assertive tone. My sister then proceeded on telling me that we should also scold the kid when she is giving us trouble with the photo shoot and have a tone cause that is the only way the child will listen. I got hesitant at first, but the parents don't say or do anything about the way my sister talks to their child, so I thought that it's normal to them. Time goes by and the child is becoming more harder to handle. She would steal food from our setup and asked her politely to not touch anything from the table that has a lot of cameras and lights on it. She is also throwing tantrums every 15 mins for not getting what she wants, like wanting juice, but only giving her water. She would yell and say, "I don't like water, you." Then my sister yelled too and copying the child's tantrums. Again, the parents did not say anything or do anything to the child or my sister, so I really thought that it's normal behavior among them. And since my sister already gave me permission to scold the child, I will blast my heart out the second this child does something again. The photo shoot is almost over, and we were just waiting for the last dish. We were eating while waiting, and our setup is just on standby. The setup has a drink on it for a background element, and we fixed the camera angle with a tripod. The child is reaching out for the drink on our setup again, and I told her, "No, you can't grab or move anything in this table. Go to your parents for food, they have pasta." The child said, "But I don't like pasta." Then proceeded to throw another tantrum and shouting, "I'm hungry. Why isn't anyone wants to give me food?" The child proceeded on grabbing my tripod with the camera on it, and I immediately jumped to my sit and yelled at her, "Do not touch my stuff." Again, no reaction from the parents. So I copied my sister. I told her, "Will you be able to pay that if you broke it?" I'm very protective on my gear because I won't be able to replace it ever when it breaks. My camera is no longer in the market, and it has a sentimental value since it is a birthday gift. The child is yelling again, and I started yelling with her just like what my sister did. Again, no reaction or action from the parents. The child started kicking the tripod, and I began to really shout at the child. She told me that she hated me, and I copied what she told me back at her. The child is yelling, "Help me, help me, help me." But again, no reaction from the parents. An employee escorted the child and the mother's wife followed. After a couple of minutes of us finishing our food, the child's father, my sister's boss, confronted me. He told me that she doesn't like the way I talk to his daughter, the way I yell and shouted at her. Then my assistant asked him, "Why didn't you talk to your daughter then?" Then he said, "Well, we own this place," so insinuating that they can do whatever they want. Then the boss asked, "How about you? Will you scold your child in public?" Then my assist said, "Well, when I was young, my parents would smack me if I did something that I shouldn't, so yeah." Then I told him that I only shouted at her daughter because I'm protecting my gear. Then he proceeded to tell us, "I can replace those 10 times more." Then I asked him, "What about the sentimental value? You cannot replace that." But the only thing that is coming out of his mouth is basically, "I have money. I can do whatever I want." They told us that the child was traumatized and doesn't want to go back to the cafe anymore. At this point, my memory is a blur because I am overridden with emotions that I am trying to suppress. All my life I have been stepped on and spitted on, so something switched in me when that child is disrespecting my work and equipment, a job that I did for free for my sister, and if what he is saying is true, why not pay for my fee then? Why make my sister ask for me to do the job for free? We still finished the job and proceeded with our life for a couple of weeks. My sister then quit the job because they are treating her like a slave, with a 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. shift with no day offs. Then this happened. Our older cousin, who is the landlord of the cafe, heard about what happened and told us that the boss wants to sue me for child abuse. I have to say sorry for him not to press charges. Did I really up? The one time I stand up for myself, then this happened? OP is not an AH for yelling. Rather, OP's boss is an AH for not taking care of her child and threatening OP of child abuse. OP's slightly harsh behavior was a response to her boss's child's teasing behavior. OP did nothing wrong. She was just trying to protect herself and her equipment. So, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 and OP's boss 2.5 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye, see you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.